Hey there, let's get started with the Maxi skirt with high split tutorial. Let's get started with supplies. You're going to need some opaque non-stretch fabric. You're going to need anywhere between 2 and 2.5 yards depending on how long you want your skirt. I'm 5'9" and I used about 2.5 yards. You're going to need pins, a fabric marker, I used chalk, medium weight fusible interfacing, a tape measure, a ruler, fabric scissors. You're going to need this thread to do the easy gathering method. This is optional if you want to do this method. I found that wire in like the kitchen section of a grocery store. It's what you use like to wrap up a turkey. And you'll need a 7 to 9 inch zipper. So cutting out our skirt panels, we're going to start with the skirt front panel, and I'm talking in inches. We're going to measure our waist times 3, then divide that number by 4. That is going to be the width. And mark that out on your fabric. I'm using chalk. The length is whatever length you want plus 1.5 inches for seam allowance. And once you've got the top and bottom of your skirt marked out on your fabric, then go ahead and connect it with straight line. And go ahead and cut that panel out. And keep it intact because you're going to use it to cut your back skirt panel as well. To make this easier on yourself, just take your front skirt panel and lay it on the fold of your fabric and just cut out the exact same panel for your back. And here's a little cameo from the family. Just wanted to say hey. So you can go ahead and cut out your waistband. You can cut out waist plus 1.5. I prefer to cut waist plus 1 because I like a snug fit. But I know that some of you mentioned that your waistband is sometimes a little too small. So if you like a little extra room, just go ahead and cut out waist plus 1.5. Then go ahead and apply your medium weight fusible interfacing to your waistband. So grab one of your skirt panels, it doesn't matter which one, they're both identical at this point. And you see that I've marked an F on my panel. I like to use my chalk and mark my panels. I do this a lot when I'm sewing because sometimes I can't tell what's the front or what's the back. So just grab your front skirt panel and we're going to fold it in thirds. So I'm folding it over one time and just kind of eyeballing it where a third of it is, and I'm leaving the last third where the F is, I'm leaving that out. So you're going to cut at that line. What this is doing is this is cutting the split and it's going to hang over your leg, whichever leg that you prefer. So my fabric is double-sided, so it doesn't matter which side shows, but you want to consider which side or which panel that you cut depending on which leg that you want it to fall on. Now that you've got all of your pieces cut, then go ahead and use your serger or a zigzag stitch and finish the raw edges around all the edges of your pieces. Okay, now it's time to sew. So grab the 2 front skirt panel pieces, and I just have my larger one on the bottom and the smaller one on the top, right sides together. Grab your pins and pin your pieces together. And take your fabric marker or chalk and mark down where you want your split to start. I wanted my split to start 7 inches from the top of my skirt, and so I made a mark very clearly so that I can see it when I start to sew. So once you've got your mark marked on your fabric and your pieces pinned, I want you to sew from the top of your skirt down to that mark. Head on over to the ironing board and press open the seam allowances that you've just sewn. You're also going to press down the seam allowance for your split. So you're just going to fold it over and press it down. If you skip this step, I mean, you don't have to, but it makes it a lot easier, and your split will be nice and crisp if you just take the time to press it down. As you guys know, I'm all about sewing with quality because I want it to look good and last. And you're going to do that on both sides of your split. So just to explain what we're going to do next, now that we've got our seam allowances pressed, we are going to sew our split down. So we're going to start at the hem on one side and sew up, come across the split, and then come down. So let's go to our sewing machine. So just like we explained, we're going to be sewing down the seam allowance to form our split. So I'm just sewing with a straight stitch because I'm not using a stretch fabric. And I'm sewing down using about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So now I'm getting close to where my split opens, and I'm just going to keep sewing, and I'm going to sew past where that stitching starts, about 1 inch, and I'm going to pivot, sew across, and pivot again to come back down the other side. And then I just keep stitching all the way down to the hem. So now we're going to get to my favorite part. This is a very easy way to gather a lot of fabric. This method is best used when you have a lot of fabric to gather. If it's just a small piece, then don't worry about it. So grab your wire, and I like to just cut a really long piece, and then I just take some tape and tape it to the back of my machine so that it doesn't go anywhere. Now I'm taking my fabric because I'm going to be gathering the waist of my skirt. And I need to change my stitch to a wide zigzag stitch. And for me, that's stitch number 4. And I'm setting it to the longest stitch length and the widest stitch length that my machine will go to. Then I'm lowering my needle and doing a couple of test stitches to make sure that the needle does not catch the thread. You want the zigzag to stitch on the outside, encasing this wire, and just slowly and carefully sew this wire to your skirt. Make sure you're careful not to catch that wire with your stitching. If you do, just take some time and just pick it out. So I'm getting close to the end, and I'm going to raise my needle, and I'm going to leave a long tail of wire. So this is where the magic happens. Lay out your piece, and you are simply going to pull one end of your string and just gather that fabric. You see how easy that is? Oh my gosh, no more trying to delicately pull delicate basting thread and it pops and then you have to start over. It's just a mess. It's one quick pull and then you've got your gathering. So now you just take the time to distribute that gathering evenly. And so the easiest way to tell if you have distributed your fabric enough, if you need to gather it more or less, is to grab your waistband. Since you're only looking at the front piece of your skirt, then just fold your waistband in half and then just kind of eyeball it and make sure that the width of fabric that you've gathered lines up with your waistband. So it's not going to be exact, but that's okay because it's gathered. It doesn't matter, but this is just a great guide to start with. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew a regular stitch over this gathering. So using a regular straight stitch, you are going to secure the gathering in place, and sew next to but not on top of your zigzag stitch. And don't catch your chicken wire or whatever this is called. I don't know what this is called, but don't catch that wire in the stitching or it's not going to pull out. Now that the gathering is secured, then you can cut the excess of your wire off and simply pull it out. If you've gathered a significant amount of fabric, then it may bunch up on you a little bit, but just loosen it up like I'm doing here and then just continue to pull your wire out. It should come right on out. Now what you're left with is nice, even, easy gathers. So go ahead and repeat this step on your back skirt panel. Now that everything's gathered, I want you to attach the front panel to the back on one side only. You're going to leave the side that you're going to put your zipper on open. Next, I want you to grab your waistband and pin it to your skirt. Whether I'm using a pattern or not, when I am pinning gathered fabric to a straight piece of fabric, I always pin the top and the bottom first, and then I pin incrementally through the length and make sure that everything is distributed evenly. When you've pinned to your satisfaction, go ahead and sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, I've got everything sewn, and I'm going to flip my waistband out and I'm going to press my waistband flat with the seam allowances facing upwards. After I've pressed it, I'm going to fold down my waistband and fold it in half in preparation for installing my zipper, and press it down to give yourself a visible crease. Now with your ends of your fabric lined up right sides together, grab your zipper and you're going to place it where it's going to be installed, with the top of the zipper at the middle of your waistband, and the bottom of the zipper you're going to mark with a pin. If you're not familiar with my zipper installation, then I'm going to link to the video in the description box to my easy zipper installation method where there's no hand sewing and no closure. So you're going to baste from the waistband to your pin, then back stitch, and then stitch from there to the hem of your skirt using a regular stitch. So now you're going to go ahead and install your zipper. I have pinned my zipper to the seam allowance, and I have a standard zipper foot attached to my machine, and I'm just attaching my zipper. And again, if you are unfamiliar with how to install a zipper, then please watch the tutorial that I've linked in the description box. It goes into great detail on how I install my zippers. The key here when installing an invisible zipper is that you need to pull the teeth back on the zipper so that your needle can get as close to the zipper edge as possible without being caught in the teeth. So now I'm just closing up the waistband to the zipper so I can get a nice clean finish on the inside and the outside. Again, all of this is shown in great detail and explained in great detail in the tutorial in the info box. And so the last step to my zipper method is on the right side of the skirt. I am stitching in the ditch, which is stitching in the seam line to attach the inside of the waistband to the skirt so that it does not flip up, and it should give you a very clean finish. One more time, the tutorial showing this in great detail is in the info box. After your waistband's done, the last step is to hem your skirt with a 1-inch seam allowance and make sure to press that hem. Hey sis, you are done.